Okay, so the next book I want to talk a little bit about is Amber Dawn's book of poems, How Poetry Saved My Life, A Hustler's Memoir. And she traces all sorts of moments of her own life as a queer woman in Vancouver, and then also as a sex worker in Vancouver. And she does so, like, I think really brilliantly and bravely, sort of searching through these moments and times in her own life and the sort of trajectory that she's been led to, which is kind of culminated into this book. I think the most powerful piece in this is her How to Bury Our Dead, which sort of harkens back to this idea of what is a queer memorial, what does it look like, and it's sort of a response or an echo of things like what ACTUP was doing with HIV/AIDS in the 80s and up until the 90s. And I talk a lot about that in my paper, so I'd rather talk a little bit about something else, and that's like interiority in the text. So Dawn has all these moments where she's in like an enclosed space or like small spaces. So one of the poems she talks about being in a birthday cake at a party where the mayor is in attendance. And I think like that line so perfectly sort of sums up this like weird way that Vancouver's dealing with sex work, in that it's like very much integral and like a part of, Vancouver's identity and image, whether we're seeing it or not. Like these are all moments in time that are based on each other, that are sort of self-sustaining each other. So it's this sort of underbelly that no one ever acknowledges or understands. So she can exist, in this cake, in this sphere, at this party that the mayor's in attendance at, as this like actor or performer, and she can kind of be in this space and time and occupy that and inhabit that. And further on, there's this other poem which talks about a bad date. And so what's happened is she's been kind of cornered into this closet. So she's in a closet, and I'm so grateful that she didn't do anything with that, kind of commenting on what the closet means in queerness. I think she lets it stand as its own. So what's happened is her just one leg's outside of the closet. She says, I get the feeling he'd rather that I just disappear altogether. I wait so long for him to tire that I begin to wonder if it feels less cruel to beat a leg than a whole person. Could he half-heartedly hit me in the face for this long? On my end, it feels less painful to be just a leg and not a whole person. It's from page 117. In accounts and discussions of sex work, particularly in like sociological texts or anthropological data, these types of moments and like stories of sex workers is like always being used and deployed in like very political ways. So I'm thinking right now about like abolitionists in Vancouver who are really interested in condemning sex work and prosecuting Johns using things like the Nordic model, which we know push sex work farther into the margins, into the the downtown east side that it's happening in right now, in industrial areas where it's harder and harder to be visible and to be safe. These types of narratives are like used by that side, to say like, look how terrible this is, look how terrible this is. And it's also used by folks who are like fighting for support of sex workers for being like, look, look what can happen. It's still a dangerous thing. We need to do all we can to support these people. And what I love so much about Dawn's telling of this, she says, I've not brought you here to worry about my life. Remember that pity is an emotion that doesn't really get us anywhere. And like, what a perfect sort of fuck you to all of these kind of comments and histories of depictions of sex work, where like here we have, a real life sex worker saying, I'm telling you this because this is me, this is part of my journey, this is part of my story, and I'm not telling it to gain like this sympathy from you. And she says like sympathy doesn't get us anywhere, it doesn't help us in any way. So for me, like thinking about like queer trauma and queer cultural production, this moment in time of when Amber Dawn's saying and refusing to be sort of pinned down as this like poor sex worker. And even in the book, like there's all these moments of like really tender, sort of like beautiful moments between, other girls she's working with, between John she's talking to, between her own partner. It's never this like knowable trajectory or understanding of sex work. It's always sort of in relation to these like kind of complicated ideas that people have stories to tell. And so if we look at queer cultural production and queer trauma here, we see that Dawn isn't necessarily saying, poor me, or look what's happened, isn't this terrible? It's an act of storytelling. It's a memoir.